Good evening, everyone. This is Keith David, and you're listening to Without Your Head.
Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neil.
And I'm Mama Creepy.
And we're joined by political cartoonist, which I don't think they even call him that in the documentary. I'll have to ask him what he refers to himself as, Mr. Fish.
Yay,
hey,
welcome.
It's Mr. Fish.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Where did the name Mr. Fish come from?
I tried to name my stepfather's bird that my mother had gotten him for Father's Day. I mean, there's a longer story. Yeah, I mean, there's no like deep meaning because I never wanted to be a cartoonist. I never wanted to do anything but be an angry sort of anarchist disappointment to my parents. And so when I was doing cartoons, my real last name is Booth. And at the time, the biggest cartoonist for the New Yorker was George Booth. So he'd already claimed the name, so I couldn't use that. And I was not going to be Dwayne, which is my first real name. But that's, although it seems hip now. I know, but it seems so like Cher or Madonna, It's just like the single first name. Yeah, so I couldn't do that. So attempting to name my the bird Mr. Fish, which I thought was the best name for a pet bird, and it was denied. Yeah, I just took it.
Mm-hmm. Did you make your parents? Did you succeed in making your parents unhappy?
Oh, for years. Yeah, because I dropped out of college and then I just lived at home and had the great, had the hours of staying up all night. And then as soon as I heard anybody stirring for breakfast, I would get in bed, and just growing my hair as long as I could possibly get it. Every parent's dream.
I saw some of the pictures from when you were younger. You had some gorgeous locks. Gorgeous locks.
Yeah, I know. I don't have the patience, but I want to get the gorgeous locks back because I really am just a pretty face once I get the hair right.
Yeah, put some bows in, slap a little lipstick on you. Perfect. You could put it on the corner if you need a little extra money.
That's in the extended cut of the documentary.
Yeah, well, he shot the filmmaker actually shot. I think he said he told me he shot 90 hours.
Really?
I think it's more than Let It Be.
Wow.
Yeah. So when they're doing that, well, first of all, how did he? Was it his idea to make it? Was it your idea? Like, how did he approach you?
Well, I'm not going to say, like, it was my idea. I needed a filmmaker. I needed my face on a 60-foot screen. I really wanted to find the right person for that.
That's probably something I would do.
Right. No, I was touring around with my first book that I had written, and I was in California, and there's a gallery out there that represents me. So I was simultaneously having book events and having an art show. And this filmmaker, Pablo Bryant, heard me on the radio, and something about my conversation thrilled him. And he came down to the gallery and said he wanted to make a documentary about me. And, it's California, so I absolutely didn't believe a word he said. He's like, yeah, I'll call you. Yeah, sure, I'll call you, yeah. But turns out, he's a really decent guy, and he's a Buddhist, which I don't think they're allowed to lie. So he followed through, and for 5 years we've been hanging out.
So what's that experience like, to have someone like following you around with a camera?
It was a lot harder for my family than it was for me because just given the work that I do, I'm used to feeling like I'm putting myself into sort of exposed situations, because I'm putting my thoughts down, and many of them are unpopular, and a certain number of them aren't even fully formed, So I'm used to putting my incompleteness out there for people to judge. So to have somebody with a camera following me around I was totally fine with it. But it was a little bit tougher for my wife.
There was one part in the documentary, and I loved this. And it was you were sitting there, and you had one of your drawings there, and each one of your daughters came up at a different time, and they looked at it, and you kind of asked them what they thought, it meant. And I thought that was great. and they each, had their own ideas. And I thought that was really cool that you incorporated them into it to, have that dialogue, and that you're not afraid to have that kind of dialogue with your children, which I think more parents, especially today, should be having that kind of dialogue with their children. But instead, they're more shelter them from all the evils of the world. No, let's start conversations with our children so they can be out in the real world. So
is that was great. And is that something indicative of like your relationship with your kids, or was it something that was done for camera?
No, absolutely. I mean, the with the kids every morning, I'm the breakfast guy. So ever since they were tiny, I put on NPR and I just complain about their, NPR's inability to actually report the right version of the news. So they're used to me having conversations out loud about what's wrong with politics and, the various players and stuff. So and then I talk to them about it. It's not just me just sort of like screaming with a spatula about how we're all doomed or anything. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, right. The fact of the matter is, like when I had the girls, it really, it gave so much more credibility in my mind to the work that I do, because all of a sudden I recognized how vulnerable human beings are. Now, I know that might just sound a little bit cheesy, but when you don't have kids, you can intellectually recognize the treachery of the world and see how lethal politics can be. But being a white male American, it's an academic discussion so much of the time. But then as soon as you have kids, all of a sudden your sympathy and your ability to have apathy or empathy for other parts of the world that we are occupying and starting military actions against and bombing defenseless people from 15,000 feet up. All of a sudden I realized, like, wow, I really understand the outrage that comes from a superpower that goes around and bashes less than third world countries and kills people at weddings and kills people at funerals. And all of a sudden I was like, and what would I do with that rage? So all of a sudden it gave me more perspective on the humanitarian responsibility I had as a artist.
I definitely understand that. I have 3 children, and adults now, and they like to think that, but anyways, 3 adults. But anyways, definitely my outlook, it did do a shift for me to basically look more vastly out in the world and to really see that. And, people that we are bombing and stuff with, these droids and everything, there's no human connection. There's none. Right. It's just like, here's some teenage kid with a stick and a seat playing a video game. And it's like, okay, there are children and families down there, and we will blow them off the earth. And I hate to say it, and I feel sorry and I feel sympathy, and my heart goes out to any terrorist attack or any kind of act of violence. But all of a sudden, anything happens on United States soil, and it's like the biggest thing ever. And if anything, if the masses that we have killed, in any other country happened here, it would, oh my God, I can't even imagine. I cannot even imagine what it would be like.
Well, there's an interesting statistic, which I don't know, I'm trying to remember exactly what it is. I think I can get pretty close. But they did a study on how many Americans have been killed by terrorism from, it was like a 20-year study ending in 2014. And the number of people killed by terrorism who are Americans, and this includes 9/11, were 3,503 or something, right? So you look at that statistic and you just consider 20 years, and you see that number, and then you set it against how many people die annually from suicide alone.
Mm-hmm.
You start to question what is the biggest threat to the American society? We are terrorizing ourselves, and then you bring in statistics of gun violence and so forth, and all of a sudden the boogeyman that we're so afraid of, and wanting to protect the motherland from these savage terrorists it's such obvious propaganda that it makes one. It's impossible to argue and communicate effectively with that level of stupidity.
It's just to create a sense of fear within the public,
Right.
by adding out those. I was having a conversation earlier today. We were joking around about the red, yellow, and orange terror safety lights or whatever.
Right.
I'm like, do they still do those? I can't remember. I'm like, what color is it today? Is it an orange day? Are we safe to go outside today? Or should we sit at home and be fearful today?
Right.
I'm like, it's just another way to make us feel fearful. And when people are afraid, they get angry. They want some way to lash out. What's a better way to lash out than, hey, these people over here, they're our enemy. All right, we have something to lash out at.
Right.
Easy peasy done. Millions are made.
Well, everyone know the terrible one is here with us as well. Troy Jones is with us.
Yep, I am.
Hello, Troy.
Hey, Troy.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Everybody's doing good. I'll speak for the group.
Excellent.
Yeah, excellent. We're doing good. Yeah. So, how old were you when you discovered Lenny Bruce?
Oh, geez. Wow. You know what? I think I was probably 15. I think, which is a great age to discover Lenny Bruce.
Yeah.
And I discovered him there was a collection of, it was The Best of the Realist, which was a magazine that Lenny Bruce was in, and it was published, the publisher was a guy named Paul Krasner. And they consider it the first underground example of underground press, alternative media. And so that really blew my mind, because not only did he publish Lenny Bruce, but he published everybody that I cared about, and a ton of cartoons, and many of them so outrageously inappropriate that it made me realize what my calling was.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said on the show, and you said in the documentary, you never wanted to be, you didn't set out to be a cartoonist, a political cartoonist. Right. Like, were there any other ideas you had? Like since you like Lenny Bruce, did you want to ever think of doing stand up, or maybe comic book stuff? Or
I did a little stand up actually, and I wanted to actually write plays, and I wanted to write dangerous essays. And sort of experiment with that kind of stuff, like new sort of much more what one would consider like intellectual art forms, very sort of literary type stuff. I never wanted to be a cartoonist. I was always able to draw very well, so I was always able to get some ideas down a lot quicker by drawing them than writing them. So that's why I had a bunch of sort of politically themed drawings, because I was looking at like Mother Jones and The Nation and other magazines that had cartoons in them, but I thought that they were addressing all the wrong issues. So just as an experiment, to myself and a curiosity, I just wanted to see if I could actually do it better. So that's why I sort of fell into it, just because I was angry about everybody who was so shitty.
Yeah. Why didn't the stand-up continue?
Because the performance aspect of it felt cheap to me. Because when I was doing it, It was I guess the late 80s maybe. And, you go to these things and, you get on, in the beginning, it's all open mic situations, and you're dealing with a group of people in the audience that are there to, enjoy the 5-drink minimum or whatever it is,
Right.
and to laugh at anything that sounds like a joke. So it was cheap. This was before Bill Hicks got really, really, it sort of reminded people what the art form could do. So it was in this, yeah. So
Funny.
It was this time when it was, Gallagher was big, I guess. So like stand-up, or Yakov Smirnoff and stuff.
Hey, what a country! Yeah.
Right. So it was really shallow humor, and I remember just doing it and watching the comedians before me, and it started to occur to me that people were laughing at where the rhythm indicated that a punchline was just said. And the content of the jokes that I was hearing was just like, oh, come on. This is, I was inspired by some great, great people, like Lenny Bruce and even Mort Sahl doing what Mort Sahl did. It was just people thinking out loud in a way that assumed intelligence from the audience. And since I wasn't getting that, and when you're 19 and 20, you're so impatient that it's just like, oh, screw this. I'm out.
Yeah.
And the funny thing too, and this is something that is just that actually I have a new book that's out and I tell this story in it. When I was doing the stand-up, I was 19, and all of the clubs insisted that the performers needed to be 21. So I had to say that I was 21. Mm-hmm. And even when I was 21, I looked like I was 13. I just never, I was the smoothest baby face, and it was just so pathetic. So in order to make myself look older, and looking back, I thought that I was being convincing, but there's no way it was convincing. I shaved my hairline back from at the top of my head. I shaved it back by about 2 inches.
Like bald. Yeah, that's.
Yeah,
I've never heard of that before.
No, but anybody who tries to do that, inside of 4 hours, you have a 5 o'clock shadow on the top of your head. So I think rather than convincing people that I was 21, I looked like I either had lost a bet or that I had escaped from, a mental hospital and nobody wanted to confront me.
I was just saying that with all the allegations now, a 21-year-old who looked like they were 13, you would have done really well in Hollywood.
Right? Yeah.
Hey, for years I've been saying card them first. That's all I gotta say. Card them. Like, may I see your ID before I talk to you?
Right.
And the time is totally past, but I gotta get the joke in anyway. In Russia, the cartoons draw you. Hey.
Right.
You said that.
That took me a second, Neil. That's so bad.
That's why I love it. Actually, speaking of that, there is a contrast in your work where there's stuff like you actually have to think about, makes you think, and then like dick jokes. So can you kind of talk about that, like to be able to appreciate both?
There's just somebody with a dick hanging out. Like, it's just,
yeah, no, I love it.
It's great. I know you do, Neil.
Yeah, what specifically is the question?
The question is just about the appreciation of both sides. Something that as intellectual can make you think is trying to say something to somebody, and then just just a straight up dick joke.
Yeah, well, the purpose of the dick joke is just as radically and politically sound as the other stuff, because I think that a dick joke will force you to think outside the box, right?
Yep.
So it's really just a way of just basically any opportunity to thumb your nose at decorum, which is where self-censorship resides, and all these various manners that muzzle people and prevent them from having enough bravery to talk honestly about what is shitty about the world. Any device that fiddles with that, by all means, I'm for.
You can't really see. I'm sorry.
I was just saying we have a call here. I don't know if this is Pablo or.
I think it is Pablo.
It is.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Party time.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yay.
Hi.
Very cool.
We're having
Sorry
a
to join the
four-way
party late.
night.
So, for people who aren't aware, this is the creator of the documentary, Pablo Bryant, and we've been talking. So, when did you decide to make the documentary?
You know what? It was a rash decision. I'll be honest. I got his book in 2012, and I wanted to make a film about him before I'd even met him.
Mm-hmm.
And which is not really a smart thing to do if you're going to make a character documentary.
That's true.
But the work spoke to me. It felt vital. It felt like it was just cutting through so much of the nonsense that passes for real discussion, and it was funny. It was heart wrenching. It was delightful. It had all these different colors. So I found Fish at a gallery show that he had at the Robert Berman Gallery, which is one of the galleries we filmed at for the film, and didn't even know if he was going to be there. I just knew that there was a show of his work there, and I went there, and he was there, and I said, I want to make a film about you. And he said, okay. We never looked back. It's been 5 years in the making now.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, it was a rash
story.
decision.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
The romance. Yeah.
It's a romantic story.
That's very romantic. By the way, I probably should say this. The name of the documentary is Mr. Fish Cartooning from the Deep End. Is it premiering this weekend?
We had our world premiere at the Austin Film Festival about a week and a half ago, and we ended up winning the Audience Award.
Oh, very cool.
It's our very first festival and our very first award, so we're doing well. And then Doc NYC, where we're screening on Sunday and Monday, is our New York premiere.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Now,
very cool.
did you have like an idea going into the documentary, like what you wanted to what you wanted the documentary to say, or did that kind of like come about while you guys talked?
Well, no, it actually came about very organically. I really did not have a plan to make a film that involved, the pressures of his economic situation, of the sort of the decline of the newspapers and magazines, and the effect that has on cartoonists and the effect that has on him in particular. That was not really the goal of the film. That happened organically. I really went looking for the film that I wanted to make. I was attracted to the work, and I felt the work was vital. The work was saying something important, but the story of Fish and his life and his family and the delightful way that he raises his girls and as I said, the pressures that he and his family face, as fewer places are willing to be brave and publish his stuff, that really all happened pretty much organically. Then you start to realize, well, there's the story here. This is important stuff. Let's explore this more. And then you start making conscious decisions about including that element more.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know Fish had mentioned that his wife had, your wife had some problems. Were there any specific things that maybe the financial things, or was it just kind of the idea of having someone around with the camera all the time?
It was the financial stuff. I mean, it was really, as Pablo said, it really coincided with a time when I was losing all of my work in magazines and newspapers. And, anybody who lives with a freelancer knows that it can sometimes be a really sort of spooky situation because nothing is guaranteed, and as we're getting, yeah. So it's just as you move forward, and your kids are getting older, and then, my knees start to hurt when I put my shoes on, and all of a sudden the wife is wondering where my retirement is, and so it's those kinds of pressures that to have somebody who's making a film, and she loves Pablo. It's not like there's this jackass in the house again.
Right.
It's still just the turmoil of just a life that is uncertain, is embarrassing for some people, and points up to certain inabilities that I tend to see as just a reflection of our common humanity, but when you're in the middle of it, it just sounds like personal. It can sometimes feel like personal failure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I gotta say that I admire you for the fact that you're able to go out, or that you have gone out and you have said things that you say things that I want to say, but have been scared and felt held back from saying. And I thank you for going out and saying those things, because that means a lot to be able to see like somebody else out there actually practicing the First Amendment and damned them all, and that's amazing. So
yeah, it is sad though. It's sad that the fact that people who don't have, what one would recognize as like an artistic ability, like to sort of render these ideas in a way that is unique. Mm-hmm. It's a shame that there's not a platform outside of that where people can actually speak truthfully about what they feel, and that there are penalties in the society that discourage people from doing that. And it's an outrage. And it does, as I say in the film, one of the things that is curious about my situation is that I never heard from anybody that I had any talent. So, like, as far as like me even appreciating what I do artistically, I don't, because I've been doing it my whole life and never got any recognition for it, or at least praise for it from my family. So it became just as mundane to me as writing a letter, or just or taking the trash out. There's very little on my end. There's nothing really fantastic about it. So it in a way it makes me feel even more alone than I might otherwise feel, because I feel like I'm just talking. This is how I communicate. I'm just a visual communicator. I have that kind of literacy for a visual language, and that pond is drying out. There's fewer and fewer people like that. But I still share the things. Yeah, I know. It's frustrating, and it's lonely though, because I know that just for what you said, I get those emails all the time where it's just like, wow, I wish I'm so happy to be essentially communicating with somebody who thinks like me. Mm-hmm. And the society is just like, isn't that, there's so many freaking bells and whistles that go off about like, isn't the democracy is in serious trouble?
I'm always saying that I'm going to end up in a concentration camp.
Is that on your wish list? Just like to lose some of the weight.
If I ever disappear for a while, I'm probably in some kind of internment camp.
Yeah, Charlotte's looking up. That's we're going to meet for the first time.
Yeah, I used to say, you know what? I'm going to end. I used to say, when Reagan was threatening about the invasion of Nicaragua, I'm like, yeah, it might be the wrong thing to do, but man, after that, my abs are going to look so great. So if I get drafted, I guess I can deal with it.
Yeah, look on the bright side. There you go.
Yeah, come on.
Right? I might as well get a good workout while you're there.
Maybe it's too early for this. I don't know, but do you know what like kind of people you want to watch this, or what type of audience is watching it? Is it people who already know Mr. Fish? Do you think people?
Well, no, not at all. I mean, I think a lot of people at the Boston Film Festival didn't know who he was, and it was really delightful. Our last screening there, people were saying things like, "I just can't believe I never knew about this guy," and how they're just trying to figure out ways to like help him financially, you know. And you know, they said they were really turned on by him, and they were really excited to find an artist that speaks to him the same way that I was excited to find an artist that speaks to me. And same thing that you were just saying a minute ago is, you know, you're so happy he's out there. So, you know, I feel lucky that I've tapped this, you know, previously somewhat unknown commodity that has the potential to really speak to people, especially in this moment that we're in. And you know, it's not about galvanizing a position from the left or right. It's about having an honest conversation and not being so precious about how we have conversations, you know. That we're, you know, we get so timid, I think. And Fish talks a lot about how a lot of people feel ignorant about politics, therefore they don't feel empowered to talk about it.
Right.
So, you know, I'm very excited and hopeful that this film will connect a lot of people that have no idea who Fisher was to him, and in a big new way.
So, for you, Mr. Fish, the last election, did that add any motivation to create?
No. No, because I mean that's the funny thing. That
I saw a few.
I've been doing the same thing forever. So I mean, in fact, it actually made me sad, and I'll tell you why. I mean, aside from the obvious, you know, freaking fascistics or slide into doomsday, but that's other than that. When I was touring with the first book when Obama was president, it was really interesting because, just as Pablo said, my art I don't favor a side. I see real despicability on both sides of the aisle. So when I'm touring with a book when Obama's president, I'm criticizing the chair of the office of the presidency, which I've always done. And I remember I did the, I forget if it was Miami or if it was Atlanta. I had a huge audience, and in the book signing line, so many of them were NRA giant. They were Republicans, and they were just like, "We've been waiting for you to come along," and you know, and blah 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 blah. So they were hearing what they wanted to hear, not exactly recognizing the fact that I hate everybody. But they were just taking that opportunity to sort of say, like, "Wow, finally we have a megaphone, and it's you." So the point I wanted to make about when Trump became president was that the level of ignorance that comes out of that administration is very, very hard to provide commentary on because it's so stupid.
Yeah, it's just obvious.
Yeah, and so to try to have intelligent...
Makes it too easy.
Yeah, it's too easy. So then therefore you have to come up with an intelligent interpretation of something that is bone-crushingly stupid. And that's a really hard thing to do. And also the other hard aspect of that is when you have somebody who is as gaudy and loud as Trump, you know, being a buffoon that draws all eyes to him, then you don't have the opportunity to criticize what's wrong with the structure of the country and how power manifests itself in the country. Because everybody's looking at Trump. And if you like him, you're supporting him because he's a great showman and he's doing, you know, he's not a politician. If you hate him, you can have the tendency to either see him as a monster or something other than just the distraction that is preventing you from recognizing what is really wrong with the system. And then you're tricked into thinking that, oh, once we get rid of Trump, everything will be fine. And we saw what happened when George W. Bush got taken, you know, when he went away. Everybody was just so thrilled with Obama, expecting Gandhi to all of a sudden be sitting in the Oval Office, you know, and then they forgive him and they look the other way when he continues with treacherous policies, you know, and then that's when my job was a little harder.
Along the lines,
that there were two. I think that there were two pieces that you put out, like, when you're talking about, like, the despicability on both sides. One, I can't remember the name of it. It was the one with Trump with little baby Hitler on his lap.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I loved that piece. And then there was the one called Sold Out with the Democratic donkey with all the different, like, Exxon labels.
Oh, yeah.
Things like
that.
that.
I had to search my mind for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that piece. It just really spoke to me about how, they're all sold out. Doesn't matter what side, both sides of the aisle. It doesn't matter. It's all the same.
And it's
those are two huge pieces that really resonated.
And it is, because it's important. It's really important for people to get used to engaging with politics with a mindset that is not so similar to sports. Because there's so much team rah-rahing that goes on. And then you've got all this sort of getting behind your team's oversimplification of how to fix the world. And then you're not a critical thinker. And then all of a sudden you're just part of this cheering mob, and nothing can be solved that way.
When you mentioned having people come in, like NRA members come and get your autograph when you had the Obama stuff, on the flip side of that, did anyone who was followed you when Bush was president, did they I want to say unfriend you, write you bad letters saying, "What are you doing now?" when you're drawing stuff about Obama?
Yes, yeah, and in fact, it was what was interesting is I got a lot of death threats when I was cartooning during the George W. Bush 8 years, and I was a little bit surprised that when going freshly into the Obama administration and keeping up my ridicule, I actually got a couple death threats from Obama supporters who were angry that and they called me a racist. Which is the irony is that their mindset is actually where the racism resides, because what they were basically equating is, okay, he's the first African American president. Okay, that significance is not lost on me, but they connect it to Martin Luther King and all of these other great black leaders, and they think, okay, well, Obama's black like Martin Luther King was, so therefore he's going to be somebody who is great. He's from a repressed people who have had a long history of suffering, so he's going to understand, which is just ridiculous. You don't become president unless you're a politician, and you're not a politician unless you know how to play that game and function in a way that is not truthful.
Some people currently president don't exactly know about politics, still end up presidents.
Right. So. Yeah, and that's the new paradigm is that for sure. And the other thing too is, like, if you look at history, and this is the other thing that is lost when all of the conversation becomes about politics. If you look at the most meaningful change that has happened in any society, it's always in complete contempt of politics. The women's movement, civil rights for African American people, for black people, gay rights, all of these things happen typically in a complete contrary trajectory from what the status quo and what the politicians are putting forward. That's always how it is. So the idea where to get people to make positive and effective change in their society, you don't go through politics. You stir up politics. You disrupt politics. You don't try to make the world better by getting your hopes and dreams into the right inbox so a bureaucrat can then know how to present it at the next committee meeting. Things don't get fixed that way,
Mm-hmm. No. Yeah. When Charlie Hebdo, I forget I said that, when they bombed there in France, were you scared at all? And also, Pablo, did anything go through your mind when you're making this documentary that, hey, maybe something could happen?
Go ahead, Fish.
Right. Yes, I was not scared at all. And it's not because I'm brave. It's because I am an American cartoonist, and there's nothing that is threatening from that group of people that would, that any terrorist would want to kill them over. And that's what was so weird about that day when Charlie Hebdo lost, their cartoonist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's insensitive what I'm about to say, but the first thing that I thought of was I was jealous of the fact that they were able to have a editorial meeting, like that there was enough cartoonists working at a magazine to actually assemble somewhere. Mm-hmm. Because that doesn't happen in the United States. It doesn't happen with me anymore. It doesn't happen with any of the other cartoonists that I talk to. So it's almost a different profession. So if I see somebody being like a cartoonist being murdered overseas, I just look at this country that I'm in and say, you know what? Just as a group of truth tellers, there's nobody who's doing anything that is threatening enough to anybody.
Mm-hmm. Pablo, did you have any thoughts at the time?
Well, it certainly felt relevant to the story I was making. Right. And there's a very powerful scene in the film in regards to that massacre, and Fish's brother. We had done an interview, sort of a dual interview with Fish and his brother, and he had expressed his concerns. That he'd read things online about people saying you should have your hands cut off, and you should be sent to Iran or whatever. And he kind of wonders out loud to Fish in the scene, that, but you probably don't share the really scary stuff with me, right? And that, we shot that before Charlie Hebdo, but it marries perfectly together with what happened to Charlie Hebdo cartoonists. And, it was a very, very sad thing. It was very powerful in some way, but, I didn't think, we didn't turn the film into a film about Charlie Hebdo at that point.
Sure. That's
just part of the fabric of being a dangerous cartoonist in the world today. Hold on, a big truck is going by.
All right.
I'm on the streets of New York right now, so excuse the noise.
You must have a very good phone.
It is amazing.
So.
I'm imagining him just walking around the streets, like.
I am. I'm out in the streets of New York.
It's like
I'm trying to find like a dark corner where it won't look like I'm like masturbating in some hallway or something.
Well, what would be great?
I'll tell you.
What would be great? No. What would be great now is if just like a jihadist like actually recognizes you, knows about the movie, and then we get to hear you, like all of a sudden you're murdered because of your association to me, and then I would have to change my story.
We've always daydreamed about you dying at the end of the film, but
I know.
Me dying at the end of the film. That was our running joke. I used to say, "Can you just develop a really bad drug habit or something so I have a really good ending?" So.
Right.
Could you please,
this is the twist we didn't see coming.
Really fast. Come on.
Well, there's always a sequel.
There is. Yes, it would be great. Not just a murder. I think if I died during my transitioning surgery, that's what I need.
Yeah.
That would be great.
That would be good.
That would be hilarious.
Have you actually done any illustrations, cartoons on Mohammed?
Yeah, I was the only. As a matter of fact, when that not Charlie Hebdo, but the previous. Do you remember the Danish cartoon controversy when there were a number of drawings of the Prophet, and there was all that mayhem? Right. I guess it was 2006. I want to say 2005, 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember, it was infuriating because all of the press here in the United States was just talking about how backwards, all these other countries are. They don't have freedom of speech. We've got the First Amendment. We can say and do whatever we want. And then people were asking about, can we see the cartoons, just to see what the story is? And nobody would publish them. The New York Times or just nobody. They said, no. So basically it's just like, as long as we keep our concept of truth-telling behind glass that we can revere, like it's in a museum, we're noble, which is nonsense. It's bullshit. So I did a cartoon that took what was the most well-known, turned out to be the most well-known cartoon from the bunch, which is Mohammed with the bomb head. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember that one. Yeah. So I took that one and I erased the bottom of it and made it a connect the dots. And the idea was that just like, all right, here in America, you know what, if you want to get involved with this, let's show your bravery about freedom of speech and your First Amendment rights, and you complete this drawing.
Oh, yep. Whoa. Maybe he did get run over. I don't know.
Mohammed got him.
Right. So I did that, and it happened to coincide with, I was doing a talk down in San Diego, and it was on a Tuesday night. And I was working for the LA Weekly at that time. So they had accepted the cartoon. And there were all meetings all during the week. We've got to brace ourselves for, eventual, maybe we're going to get shot, we're going to get in trouble, we're going to do all this sort of stuff. But they were going to do it. So I went down, and my whole talk was about the vibrancy of the alternative press and how the only hope for, the Fourth Estate is this alternative press, because they're willing to do something that not even the New York Times or the Washington Post are willing to do, and publish this cartoon. So blah, 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 singing the praises. I go home that night and am ready to show my wife online. I'm like, okay, I don't know what the rest of the week is going to be like, but apparently the new edition comes up at midnight, so we're going to see my cartoon. Mm-hmm. So I open the computer, go to my spot, and it's a different cartoon. So I went in the next day and I said to the creative director, I said, what happened last night? I was ready to sort of be some sort of hero, because literally there was no rendering of Muhammad in the entire country. So he said, what do you mean it's not in there? So we opened it up, and I showed him in the paper version, and he's like, oh, what the hell? I had no idea. So we went to the editor, and it turns out that the editor had gotten a call, literally, it was like 11:45, from the New York office, because the LA Weekly was part of the Village Voice company. So New York called, and it was basically stopped the presses and said, you have 10 minutes to find another Mr. Fish cartoon to go into that slot, because we can't, as a company, support you in publishing that. So they killed it.
So the Village Voice, so it was part of the Village Voice that had that stopped?
It was the Village Voice, because the LA Weekly was the chain, the Village Voice media company.
That seems just bad shit to me. That
it
the
was
Village
crazy.
Voice, the Village Voice of all papers would be like,
history.
Oh, no, that's too much. That just that blows my mind.
Oh, yeah.
Because you worked for them, didn't you? You worked for the Village. You worked for the Village Voice for a while, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, because I was the LA Weekly, like I said, was Village Voice, but I also had a deal where I was for the entire chain. I did cartoons for a couple years.
That's so strange. I mean, I can imagine that. Well, oh my gosh, you went too far this time.
Yeah.
I have a friend who is an animator for South Park, and he took me on a tour of their studios. I don't know, it was a while ago, but at the time we couldn't check in anywhere on our cell phones because it's actually, they don't want anyone knowing where the studios are, because they were worried about
right
potential terrorist attack.
Yeah, wouldn't they move them from time to time?
I don't know. I don't think so. It just, there's no markings or anything of it. I don't want to explain what it looks like, I guess, but
that's why I go as Mama Creepy.
Yeah.
So, do you know what the plans are for the documentary once it's done playing at the theaters? in the tour?
Well, we've submitted to a lot of other festivals right now, so we're waiting to hear back on those festivals, and we're looking for distribution, and we're beginning to reach out to those kind of distribution companies, and we'll see if we continue to do well at the festival circuit. It's sort of a litmus test,
Mm-hmm.
People need verification that something is good these days. They don't. I think even if a distribution company saw the film and loved it, they would still have to ask themselves, yes, but is this something that people are going to like, right? So there's, getting well received at festivals could really help us. And, as I said, we've already won an audience award on our very first festival. So we're doing very, very well right now. And, I want to pack the house in New York. So all you New Yorkers, you come out on Sunday. If I may do a little plug, come out on Sunday and see this film, because you're not going to see anything like it anywhere else. I'll tell you that. Mm-hmm. There's no other artist like Mr. Fish. There's no one with his willingness to go where he goes, where no man has gone before. And
you represent the First Amendment for us all.
It's true.
Wow.
It really is, and it's
true.
I need a cape. I'm starting to think I need a
cape. First Amendment, man.
Oh, a cake. I thought you said a cake at first, but a cake.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Give him a cake.
Well, I was like, I thought you just wanted like a present.
Whatever. You can have both, sure.
Well, speaking of it, I just want I just because I don't want to sit and be lavished so heavily. The cake thing. This is just a tiny curiosity that I realized about myself. Has nothing to do with anything, but I'll share it. I hate cliches. I'm sure everybody hates cliches. Mm-hmm. And I'm with people that start, it's just like, yeah, well, it takes and then people have to they force themselves to finish. It takes a village. And it's just like, yeah, that's brilliant. That's the best you could do. But there's one cliche that I realized that I absolutely love. It's because I was a fat little kid, and I'm still a fat kid inside. So whenever anybody says, you know what, if I got this blah, 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 it would really be the icing on the cake. Mm-hmm. Right? So they say icing on the cake, and I realized that my whole physiology just does a little leap. Because I like cake. I'm just like, that's how ridiculous I am. I'm just like, I'm right now thinking of icing, and I'm so happy.
Yeah, put a smile on my face too, though.
Yeah, right. See,
now I want chocolate cake.
Yeah, it makes everyone happy. If he just put some cake in the Mohammed pictures, everyone would be fine.
Or at least some frosting.
Yeah,
cake isn't there.
Right.
It'll bring peace to the world.
Yeah, and so I guess that's the question. What makes you happy, Mr. Fish? I guess cake is the answer.
Cake does.
I thought you were going with "you can't have your cake and eat it too." I've never even understood that saying.
Right.
Icing on your cake.
No, the have your cake and eat it too. It's like,
have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Oh no, I've done that.
I remember Ellison always hated that one too. Like he always said, you physically have to have the cake
later,
in order to
eat it.
Eat it. Yeah.
Otherwise, what are you gonna do? Like, just have a cake collection?
If you don't have a cake, then you can't eat it. It's impossible.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So, Mr. Fish, what is it like to see yourself on the screen and with an audience?
It's unnerving. I'm not. I'm just like, really? That's what I was deciding my hair should be doing that day? Yeah, no, it's fine. It's totally fine. I mean, it's hard in the sense that I'm not impressed by anything that I do. So, I mean, it's sort of odd to sit and watch somebody doing something that is mundane to me. Like it's odd because I'm probably the only I'm like somebody I'm not the audience for my work necessarily. Yeah.
Did you have any influences in art, like even if it wasn't a political cartoonist, but just someone that you liked the artwork?
Wow, that's the kind of question that I'll answer now, and then I'll be like riding home, and I'll be like, oh God damn it, what about such and such?
Ralph Steadman.
Right. There's Ralph Steadman. Ralph Steadman I thought was great when I was, I guess, much younger. But I could just say like Goya, and of course like Daumier, and sort of just the older guys. And as cheesy as it sounds, I love Banksy.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds cheesy to me just because it's just like the answer of like, hey, who's your favorite band? The Beatles. Like, yeah, Jesus. But yeah, I mean, there's. Go ahead.
No, just keep going. It wasn't important.
See, now I'm intrigued.
Oh
no, I mean, go ahead.
Oh, I put two things together because I know they actually played this movie called Chasing Bansky last year at the Boston Film Festival, and I was wondering when were you guys at the Boston Film Festival? Was it this year?
No, we haven't been yet.
Oh, I thought you mentioned the Boston Film Festival earlier.
Not me, no. The Austin.
Austin. I'm sorry.
That's it.
Yeah. All right. No,
I guess my phone isn't that good.
Yonder my way.
I just wonder how I missed it because I live in the area. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry for the confusion.
That's all right. I'll edit that out so I don't look so stupid.
Or just change Pablo's thing.
In New Orleans, though.
Oh.
And I think it's coming up. Just saying. Putting it out there.
Thanks. So, what? Did you have any say or input in the finished product? Like when you're editing it, I don't know if you did the editing, but when you're putting it together, did you ask Mr. Fish any input on how you wanted to form the documentary, or did you want that all up to you?
No, and he actually was, we didn't talk about it too much, but on the occasions that we did, he was like, it's your film, you make your film. So he really trusted me a lot, and he was pretty hands off. After we did have a cut and we were sort of going in from a rough cut to a final cut, I would show him those versions, and he would give me notes on things. If I thought they were good notes, I would take them, and if I didn't, I would ignore them. I mean, I had no. He never tried to like put the screws on me to like really, change anything. There's certain cartoons that he's done that he doesn't even really like that much that I like. So we would have these discussions. Right. He would say, "Why do you have that horrible cartoon in there?"
I don't even get it. I'd say.
Yeah. It's like I have to explain his work back to him. It was a whole thing.
And then there's ones that how many times have I begged you to put the exploded George Washington face one in? It's like every time we talk.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm like, that's genius. Disgusting.
Gotta put that in there.
What's your history with Graham Nash?
You're talking to Fish or to me?
Well, either of you, I guess.
Well, Fish really is the one who had a relationship.
Yeah, it's I reached out years ago to try to get in touch with Neil Young, because when I was when I was writing for the LA Weekly, I was sort of the culture guy. And so it was basically, I could go find all the people that inspired me and just have an excuse to sit down with them and talk seriously about what the fuck went wrong, from the 1960s to now. And so it turned out that the publicist for Neil Young also was Graham Nash's. And so he basically told me, he says, "You're never going to sit down with Neil Young. Nobody sits down with Neil Young. And even if you get, an opportunity to sit down with Neil Young, it'll be at, it might be at his house, and you will go in the front door, you'll hear the back door open, and then you'll run to see, Neil Young disappearing into the woods in like a flannel shirt." So he doesn't like to be interviewed, basically.
He's like Sasquatch.
Yeah, right. So they hooked me up with Graham, and he's just one of these people. As soon as I met him, I felt like I'd known him, and he sort of felt similarly, and we had just a really long, amazing conversation. And so whenever he's in town, I would interview him, or we would just see each other. So we just developed this real appreciation for what each other does. Because he's so earnest and so committed to remaining relevant in an actual way, not in a nostalgic way. And I so admire that.
Mm-hmm. And Pablo, was he on board right away when you asked him to be part of the documentary?
No, not necessarily. I mean, we reached out, and you wonder if your email was not received or whatnot. Mm-hmm. But when I think I was planning to come out to Philly to shoot something with Fish, and Fish said, Graham is going to be in town and he's going to be playing. So we just seized on the moment. We probably both reached out to him. I can't remember how it all went down, but I said, look, just 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes. Just give me 20 minutes. That's all I ask. Mm-hmm. And so he did. Like 10 minutes before he went on stage, he was talking to us for the film, and I said, "Well, I think I've got everything." And he said, "Well, that's wonderful." He got up and he was done as soon as I said we were done. He was happy to be done with it. But he was delightful, and he punctuates the film in a really beautiful way. There's moments that where he comes into the film that are extraordinary to me, and it was a great getting him, and we also had this odd history, to just do a little backstory, where my parents are documentary filmmakers. And they made a film called Celebration at Big Sur that had Joan Baez in it, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young in it, and all these wonderful soul singers. And it's an obscure film. I think it was released by Warner Brothers back in the day when it came out in like 1970. But nobody knows about this film right now anymore. And I'm going to tell my version of the story, Fish. So we were talking about what happened to the promise of the 60s, the scene that we have in my film. And he was Fish is sort of musing on, where did all that energy go, all that momentum, all that, where did that movement go? And he was talking about meeting David Crosby and Stephen Stills and Wavy Gravy and all these people from that era that he admired. And I said, about this film, Celebration at Big Sur? Because you would really like it. And he said, I love that film. I sit and I draw, I put it on and I draw art to it for hours and hours. He said, it's one of my favorite films. I said, well, my parents made that film. Oh, wow. So we had this moment of connection, and then Graham Nash ended up being in my film as well as the film my parents made 47 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Pablo, what is your background in movie making?
I'm a camera operator, so I've worked on other people's documentaries. I made a short documentary probably about 10 years ago on the epidemic of homeless children in America, and an outreach group that was doing some really good work around that issue. And but I worked on a lot of other people's documentaries, and part of my brain was always wondering, well, what could I make? And certain ideas come into your head, or certain things come up in the news, certain people doing really important stuff that you think, that's worthwhile, that could be something. And so I was sort of on the lookout, but I think that's why when I found his work, I just dove in head first. Without a bathing suit on or any money at all. Yeah.
I have to say something really quick here that is striking me as funny. I think I have to leave in like 5 minutes because my wife is supposed to pick me up. And what was funny about it is that she texted me because she's listening to the podcast, and she says, "Oh, very cool." And she said, "You know what? You're starting to sound a little tired. I think I'm going to come and get you." Oh, it's like, really? Yeah, I thought I was on fire. Oh God.
Well, that's very cute, and I assume she might be listening with the free app TuneIn. We'll plug for TuneIn, but yeah. All right. So, well, anyway, the you guys are playing in New York this weekend, and how can you follow the how can you follow Mr. Fish? How can you follow the documentary?
Well, Fish has his own site, clowncrack.com. We have a Facebook page, Mr. Fish Documentary on Facebook. We have, I think it's at Mr. Fish Movie on Twitter. I don't have all the handles in front of me. We have a, what's that? What's the one that you have now too, Fish? The image one. It's another social media platform.
Instagram?
Instagram, yeah. We have an Instagram page.
What's
the image sites.
Instagram?
Well,
you know what's funny?
Is the best way.
Like naming all of that is just like, don't people just go to Google now and just type in Mr. Fish movie,
yeah, that's probably
and then all of a sudden it'll be all that stuff.
That's very true.
I just love when people do that. Well, where you can find me is this and that. It's just like, just type it into the search engine. Everything pops up.
Yeah, I have one last question for you, Mr. Fish. Not necessarily about the movies or anything, but what are your thoughts on the rise of the internet meme?
Well, it depends on who's making them and what they love. Some of them I think are really funny, but at the same time, it's also a way to devalue the craft of art making. Mm-hmm. Just because it's anybody can do it, which is great. There's a great virtue to that. But the problem is if the preponderance of political commentary is all of a sudden going to be these memes, then that will determine what is the definition of political cartooning is. And then therefore what I do is going to be antiquated and completely ineffectual. It's the same thing as, like I was talking about earlier when I was doing a little stand-up comedy, and nobody who I was hanging out with knew who Lenny Bruce was, So what happens is if you have an industry that all of a sudden is taken over by mediocrity, then expertise becomes unrecognizable. And then therefore it loses the opportunity to have a platform with which to, espouse your crazy ideas. So while the concept of memes is totally fine with me, it's in danger of cheapening the art of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Gene Wilder gets credited with a lot of quotes he never said.
Right. Yeah, those are great. I love the Gene Wilder ones.
There you go. Well, I want to thank you guys both for coming on tonight. It's been great.
Yeah, no,
you're welcome.
Sorry
I joined the party late. I didn't know I was invited, so my apologies.
No, it's better late than never.
Yeah, Troy was late too, so no. But yeah, it was great. And
all right.
And I really did love the documentary. It was awesome.
Great.
Yeah, it was
great.
really
Well, thank
great.
you. Well, yeah, so it's screening in New York at the Cinepolis Chelsea at 4:30 on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. And I will be there.
And at 10:15 a.m. on Monday at a different theater.
The IFC Center, I believe.
Yes, that's right.
Oh,
there you go. So all you early risers, come see an outrageous film at 10 in the morning.
Very cool.
And and if there's a place to plug in a toaster, I'll be making waffles.
See, that's how you get them in. Bribe them with waffles or pancakes or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, this is just like Eggo waffles. If you just do it in the toaster, I expect like a Belgian waffle or something. All right, very good.
Yeah, you're not that picky, shush.
No, I am pretty picky, actually. When it comes to waffles. All right.
Man.
All right, on that note, I'm out, guys. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I think Mr. Fish's wife is right in coming to pick him up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it deteriorated into pancakes, waffles, and my love of cake.
Yes.
It's a typical interview here on the show.
Thank you again so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was fun.
Cool.
Yeah, great. And good luck. Good luck with the showings.
Onward.
Hi, this is John Kassir, the voice of The Crypt Keeper, and you're listening to Without Your Head. I love a girl who'll give you head, and then let you keep it. Oops, she's without her head.